Hello, wrestling fans, and welcome to Talmbout Rasslin right here on the Black Phoenix Network. I am your host, the untouchable J.R. Atkins, and this is your primary destination for wrestling conversation. First, I want to send a huge shout out to anyone who has tuned in to the Talmbout Wrestling podcast for the last few weeks. It's been an amazing privilege to be able to finally bring you my inner wrestling thoughts. And also, if you consumed any of my other content, whether it be Manifesto Mondays, which recently debuted, or any of my What's Up Wednesday articles, thank you for that. And if you haven't, be sure to check out the Substack, where I talk about a lot of different stuff. I talk about my music, I talk about politics, relationships, pop culture, anything like that, aside from wrestling. So that's a side note. But let's get into some wrestling, all right? So after last week's show, where I did my very first countdown, where I counted down the top 5 worst WrestleMania decisions ever, I fell so in love with the format, right? Because it was cool, and didn't make me have to talk about some of the crazy nonsense that's going on in wrestling, at least with WWE. So I figured, you know what? Let's do it again. Except this isn't going to be a countdown. I'm borrowing a little bit, but it's really an opportunity for you, my viewers, to get to know me just a little bit better. And I figure, what better way to get to know me than to learn who my favorite wrestlers of all time actually are, right? You can learn a lot from a person from that, I think. So, this week's episode will be just that. It's not a countdown. It's just a trip down memory lane so you can see what I like about wrestling, who I like in wrestling, and like I said, you learn a lot from a person, from their favorites. So without further ado, let's get into J.R. Atkins's favorite wrestlers of all time. Let's take a bit of a rewind, because this is going to be a little different. I got into wrestling, let's say in the 90s, early 90s. I actually don't ever remember not liking wrestling, but that's neither here nor there. And unlike most, who will cite maybe your Hulk Hogan's or your Ultimate Warriors or those types of guys, Macho Man, that was a little bit before my time. My first favorite was the Hitman, Bret Hart. So it hits a little different. My relationship with Bret Hart is a little different maybe than a lot of people, because being from Memphis, Bret Hart actually spent a lot of time here. There was a lot to the feud of Bret Hart and Owen versus Jerry Lawler, and usually it was Jeff Jarrett. One of the first events I remember attending in the Mid-South Coliseum was an event that featured, if not that match, it was maybe Bret versus Jerry Lawler, but it was a steel cage match. I do remember that much. And I was there that night. If you could, I'm pretty sure you can find it on YouTube if you search Hart versus Lawler. So, and that was an amazing time. And you got to think, Bret was the heel in that time, which is crazy. But out of that, seeing him on WWF TV, completely different. He was so technically sound. The pink and black was visually catching, and it was very different because a lot of men didn't wear pink. That was like the craziest thing about Bret. He was like the only guy in the 90s wearing pink. Way before Cameron, it was Bret Hart. Thanks. And Bret was the guy. Bret was absolutely the guy. Excellent execution. Now, it wasn't like a great promo or anything, but in the ring, untouchable. Had some very classic, iconic matches. More than I can name. But I think one of the things that I want to do with this list is at least point out my favorite matches, if I can, from the people that I'm naming in this list. And if I'm going with Bret Hart, it's a bit cliche, maybe, but maybe not. My favorite Bret Hart match off the top of my head is the one that he had with 1-2-3 Kid. I'm not sure if that was a Raw or Superstars or something. I'm not sure where it was, but that match was phenomenal. One of the first like phenomenal matches that I remember thinking like, wow, this is actually like everything. 1-2-3 Kid being like this high flying, fast, young up and coming superstar within WWE or WWF, and Bret being the champion, being the excellence of execution, this um this technical wizard. That match really set the standard even today to what I look at in those types of matches. When they say style makes the fight, like that was absolutely a clash of styles, and it worked so well together. Bret was the guy. Bret was absolutely the guy, and still is somewhat in that vein, right? My DVD collection has pretty much every Bret Hart focused WWE production, at least, that exists. Um, and we're talking timeline, but I guess I'll go out of order. Him going to WC, like he was my favorite then. He stayed in that range throughout his career, right? Even through the WCW era, which was bananas. Because how do you not know what to do with Bret Hart? But there it is. So definitely was a favorite. Definitely, you know, hated to see the WCW run. And even today, we look at a lot of how Bret Hart is, and we wonder like, what if? What could have been? You know, what if Goldberg didn't kick him in the head? You know, what could the rest of his WCW run look like? Would he have ended up back in WWF? What if Owen didn't die? You know, that all of that is like the ripple effect of everything, really. So Bret was definitely my original guy, and like I said, he's still one of the best ever. And there are plenty of matches that I look at. People now that I wonder like, what if Bret could have got him? What if Bret could have had a match with him? So definitely hate that we never got to see a lot of those matches with, because he absolutely could have carried on over into the mid 2000s to late. I mean, he could have went if he didn't go WWE or WWF. He could have went to TNA. He could have started a Canadian company. He could have done. He could have done a lot of things post WCW and WWF. So it's one of those things that we'll never know. What we do know though is about that guy who usurped Bret Hart as my guy, especially throughout the '90s, the late '90s. And this is gonna seem kind of strange considering because most people are one or the other here. But my next and probably one of my all-time, the Heartbreak Kid, Shawn Michaels. I didn't even know I could do a Shawn Michaels. That's actually kind of cool. Then this raspiness helps. So Shawn started becoming my guy somewhere maybe after the first Royal Rumble that he won. Is where I really started paying attention to Shawn. Um, I know WrestleMania 11 he wasn't there yet. Um, Sid, the Sid angle with Sid becoming his bodyguard, which again I was still paying attention to Shawn. Let me take that back because I was still paying attention because there was the Diesel aspect. There was Bret. Bret was going through his stuff with Bob Backlund and Owen. Diesel ended up winning the championship. So I had eyes on all of what was happening there. Um, and then Shawn was kind of there too, was kind of starting to ascend. Bringing in Sid as his heavy was also a choice, but it worked. We also have a Sid. I think by that point I had started seeing him in USWA, and I kind of got acquainted with him within Memphis. Plus, one of my earliest memories also was a WCW memory, which was the Sid and Vader versus Sting and Davey Boy Smith tag match that they had, the Masters of the Powerbomb um, thing. But truth be told, I actually didn't watch that match until like last week or the week before. I actually just recently watched that match for the first time. That's neither here nor there. Um, so I already had kind of a built-in understanding of who Sid was and how all of that actually ended up working out. So all of that was the thing. That's where I started kind of paying attention and like, okay, cool. Um, he comes back from the in that time frame. He became the babyface. He won the Intercontinental Championship. Um, and we really started rolling, and we were getting back into the Shawn Michaels as the guy thing, right? Um, and you know, if you watch any of the documentaries, you hear Bret Hart talking about it. You know, Bret felt that they were basically gearing up to replace him with Shawn. If that was the plan, that's exactly what happened with me. I absolutely went along for the ride, and I was a part of the clique. This untouchable J.R. Atkins thing that I have, been doing very heavily. That there are pictures that I've drawn of me as the untouchable J.R. Atkins. This is before I had hair, but me as basically the Black Shawn Michaels. Absolutely 100%. I was locked in and stepped with everything HBK, and maybe it was somewhat personality, but in ring it extended even more. Shawn Michaels is everything that if I were a wrestler, he's everything that I would want to be as a wrestler. The way he works, just head and shoulders. Now, the funny thing, so I'll tell you how far this goes, and this is a deep cut for you kiddos out there, or if you're not an internet nerd, you don't know this either. But there was a time there were things on the internet, in the early days of the internet, called e-feds, where people would basically have characters on the internet. And I really don't even know how the e-feds work because I never actually joined one. I did actually, I did, but there was they would ask what's your style, what's your wrestling style, and at the time there was still some stuff. There was a lot of stuff was still new, but one of those things was the all rounder, somebody that does a little bit of everything. And I was like, yep, that's it, because that's what Shawn Michaels is, and that's what I want to be. Shawn Michaels wasn't necessarily just like a high flying guy. He was high energy, but he wasn't always like a high flying guy. He did some for the time. He did some kind of risky type stuff, but he wasn't never like a, especially in the way that we've come to know what a high flyer is. He's never been that by any stretch of the imagination. Um, he does everything though. He just great in ring. Um, I was locked in for the ladder match at WrestleMania 10. This is before he became world champion type Shawn Michaels, but just beginning of probably their entire trajectory. Once he became WWF champion, and we got the click. I again locked in, lock step with HB Shizzle. Okay, don't know why it's Shizzle, and it didn't change when he became a heel. He was still cool because then he was doing DX, and DX was the coolest thing ever at that time frame. So I absolutely was locked in with HBK. Why wouldn't I be? Who wasn't? Who wasn't? Suck it. I wasn't one of those kids that got in trouble for telling the teacher to suck it because that always kind of seemed crazy to me. But I mean, it was a thing. His matches were legendary, legendary. And then, on top of all that, he comes back. He comes back. He retires after dropping the belt to Stone Cold, and then he comes back. 2002. And he's just as good in 2002 as he was when he left in 98. Make it make sense. You can't make it make sense. You can't make it make sense. His second run may have been even better than the first. And if there's anything that I would have wanted more of, is him winning more titles, more singles titles. Because all he really won when he came back was he won the World Heavyweight Championship in his second match back, lost it at that Armageddon, and he had some tag title runs throughout those years, but he never won like a singles championship. Would have loved that. Would have loved to see him with the another Intercontinental run, another a U.S. Championship run, maybe. Um, we were deprived. We were deprived of that. So go figure. But even with that, the second run was about the classics, and if we're doing things about the best matches from my favorites, hands down, Shawn Michaels versus Undertaker, WrestleMania 25, not 26. 26 was good. And there's a lot of debate about which one usually would go on that list. It's WrestleMania 25 for me. Listen, I had long since hoped, especially since Shawn came back as this, kind of born again Christian. That wasn't his character necessarily, but we knew that was what had been going on in his personal life. And I long since hoped. I was like, if they ever run, it's written right there. Shawn Michaels, Undertaker. It writes itself. And throw it in Hell in a Cell, because that first one, the original Hell in a Cell match, was a classic. So let's run it back. Okay? And I said, if they ever run that match at a WrestleMania, I don't care where it is, I am going. I will be there. So at the Royal Rumble, I want to say maybe 2007. They teased it at the Royal Rumble. They were the last two in the ring at the Rumble. Oh, it'll be great. And they have this exchange, and everything's great. Oh, it's perfect. It's perfect. So fast forward, we don't get that match that year. Taker wins the Rumble. We don't get it the next year. 2009. Here we are on the road to Shawn Michaels versus Undertaker. And guess what? We were on the road to Shawn Michaels Undertaker, and I was on the road to Houston, Texas, baby. Okay? Again, you're getting to know a little bit about your host. Let me tell you, I went to Houston, Texas. I didn't have a hotel. Slept in my car. Drove from Memphis to Houston. Slept in my car for 2 or 3 days. But I didn't shower. I bathed. I refreshed myself, because I don't want to call it anything other than what it is. Refreshed myself in a gas station. That's how I say it. You can say that's how serious I was, but listen, I could have got a room. Why didn't I get a room? I could have. I had the money. You know how I know I had the money? I got merch. Okay? I went to Access, which was, I don't think, they don't call it Access anymore, but I went to Access, which is basically what the superstore and all that stuff is now. But I don't even know what they call it now. It's basically what that used to be, though. I went to Access 2 days in Houston before Mania. My World Heavyweight Championship that I had no idea where it is now, that I had signed by Honky Tonk Man and Ron Simmons. I don't know where it is. Don't know where it is. I had pictures with Eve Torres and a couple other people. Gail Kim, I think. It was a hell of a time. It was a great time. And I was in the building for that match. It is probably the first time that I remember marking out in the way that I did. And there's one particular moment when Shawn Michaels kicks out of that tombstone. Roof comes off the place. I jump out of my seat. Absolutely insane. It wasn't Hell in a Cell. It was okay. It was all right. Didn't matter. Shawn's the guy, man. And there are a couple of people on this list that I would have loved to have seen him have matches with, that, again, we didn't necessarily get a chance to see one way or the other. Well, we didn't get to see it all for different reasons. So that sucks. But Shawn was the guy. Now here's going to be an interesting one that a lot of people may not understand if all you know is WWE wrestling or WWF wrestling. But again, remember, I grew up in Memphis and I grew up watching USWA. And no, it's not going to be who you probably would think, especially considering I'm from Memphis. It's not who you would think. Neither of the guys that you probably would think. The next guy, who was one of my faves, and he may actually even predate the other two, if we're going to be honest. Too sexy. Brian Christopher. Rest in peace. Listen, this was a little tricky as far as like finding a favorite match of his that I enjoy. Because I don't think I have one. Memphis Wrestling wasn't about having like great matches and that type of thing. Memphis Wrestling was about the personalities, basically. The matches, if you go back and watch a USWA match, they are very pedestrian, especially around the early 90s, early to mid 90s. Very pedestrian. But one guy stood out to me, kind of for the same reasons that Brett did, and kind of for the same reasons, especially that Sean did. And that is Too Sexy, Brian Christopher. Now, it was years before I really knew and accepted that Brian Christopher was Jerry Lawler's son. Because I didn't, again, they kept it kayfabe. Because again, Brian Christopher. It wasn't Brian Christopher Lawler. It wasn't Brian Lawler. It was Brian Christopher. I thought it was Brian Christopher. He didn't look like Jerry Lawler. You know? But he was that arrogant. When he was a heel, he was that arrogant, cocky. He was our Shawn Michaels in a lot of ways. Now, again, maybe not necessarily in ring, but as far as character, as far as being, basically an obnoxious, heel, absolutely, he was the guy. He was, he was poised to be, and it probably was intended to be this way. He was poised to be everything that Jerry Lawler had been prior. And even though the name was like Too Sexy, Brian, that never really was like the character necessarily. It never was like how he played it. It was more just the name. And I want to be made very clear that I said Too Sexy, Brian Christopher, and not Grandmaster Sexy, because that shit was an abomination. I won't even call it an abomination because it was over, right? It was super over. But I hate that he never got the chance to be just Too Sexy Brian Christopher. I would have loved to have seen what that looked like as him as a, maybe not even a main eventer, but just the chance to evolve that character. And he got in his WWF run. Again, it got over. But his original, again, a lot of people don't even probably know the history, right? And I don't want to say I'm a historian per se, but like he came into that light heavyweight division that Vince probably never really gave two skirts about, if we're being honest, but he had it. Probably just to, who knows what the reason was. So he comes to that light heavyweight division, has a couple of matches, never wins the title, starts teaming with Scott Taylor, who was too hot, if I'm not mistaken. And they become too much, and then they have this weird kind of whatever gimmick. And then eventually they turn it into these hip-hop, this parody hip-hop thing where he's Grandmaster Sexy and Scotty Too Hotty, and it's just fine, it's cool, but it was like a mockery. And it was a comedy gimmick, and it wasn't. And they won tag team gold, a time or two, probably just once actually, at least with that combination. He never really got and I don't know if it was a height thing or I don't know what it was. He never got a shake to be Brian Christopher as we knew him to be in WWE. And that's one of those matches that I think I would have loved to have seen is Brian Christopher versus Shawn Michaels. And that actually might have happened. I'm not even going to say that it hadn't. And I'm going to cage match that eventually and see. It might have actually happened, and I just didn't see it. But I would have loved to have seen the evolution of the Too Sexy character, or at least see what it would have looked like in WWF. They did him no favors. His theme in WWF, it's all right. It's cool. It sticks out in my brain. A lot of people like it, but does no favors. When he was in Memphis, he came out to obviously I'm too sexy for my shirt, too sexy for my shirt, so sexy. It worked, and then he came out and doing a little strut thing. It worked. So you definitely couldn't use that obviously in WWF at the time, but you could have gave him something that was similar. I don't know. Brian was my guy. Brian was my guy, my hometown guy. And the thing that I hate now is there is a severe lack of Memphis representation on WWF TV, WWE TV rather I should say, or even AEW TV, wrestling in general. There's nobody. A lot of these great cities have people who kind of represent them. Chicago has Punk, and there's like a great, Chicago pride. Same with people from New York, from, that certain places have people that are like their pride. When they go to their hometowns, it's yeah, we don't have that right now. There's no Memphis. There's no guys in Memphis that are going to that are going to be the guy. You know what's going to happen though? If it ever happens, and I can't for the life of me figure out why it hadn't happened yet. The day that Trick Williams comes out on a WWE show in Memphis, Tennessee, it's going to seem like he's from here. Because if you think Whoop That Trick is loud anywhere, it's definitely going to be loud in Memphis. Moving along. So we got Bret Hart, and then Shawn Michaels becomes the guy. Brian Christopher somewhere in the middle there. He kind of happened. Timeline-wise, I couldn't really figure out at what point I got into Brian and he became the favorite, but I feel like it was all kind of happening in that nebulous time frame. But this next guy, you know what? I was going to get ahead of myself. Let me bring it back. But they're two guys. I'm not sure which came first, but I think I can go with this first guy first. My first favorite black wrestler. Because there weren't a lot. And there definitely weren't a lot that were held in high regard or in high positions. Beyond Ron. And Ron, again, was kind of before my time. I wasn't even, I was watching, but I don't think I was watching WCW enough to know Ron and to hold him in that regard in WCW. WWF wise, there was Ahmed Johnson. It's like, oh, okay, cool. And Ahmed probably could have been the guy, should have been the guy in WWF. But whatever happened with that, it didn't work out that way. But the first black wrestler that I would put on my list to say that became my guy, that I was like, yo, definitely. And he's a low key one because he's not somebody that I technically always will put there when I'm talking about it, but he definitely was in that position. And it's not The Rock. Because theoretically, not even theoretically, but if you're paying attention to the timeline, the guy that I'm about to name and The Rock kind of almost ran somewhat parallel a little bit. Booker T. This is a very interesting entry because of what I think of Booker T's run and his career. So let's start with one of my favorite tag teams, probably my favorite tag team, period, is Harlem Heat. Perfect. The look, the music, the moves, the teamwork. Harlem Heat was easily my favorite tag team. There may be some others. I don't think there's a team that I watched that when I look back and can say, oh, this is my favorite team. There aren't any, or there aren't many, like Harlem Heat. Um, and they were the WCW team between them and the Steiners, maybe. But the Steiners, they kind of had a WWF run. So Harlem Heat, I think, were the flag bearers of WCW's tag team division. And out of that was Booker T. And again, Booker kind of was in that all-arounder range. Again, kind of like we were talking about with Shawn. Booker T, like Stevie Ray was the power. Booker T was the speed and the finesse. Because he made everything look good. He made everything look smooth. He had a bit of breakdance to his moves, where the whole spin and Rooney comes from. It wasn't just a whole dance he does and turn around and turn to, I'm pretty sure that was a Vince thing. And Vince like, yeah, do that. Do that, damn it. But prior to that, it was just a smooth way that he came out his X kick. Like he would hit the X kick, come down, and then spin, hit the spin out of it, or whatever. Cool. And these were like brothers. These wasn't like, just a couple of black guys. No, these were brothers. They came out with do-rags, with the nasal strips on or whatever. Like these were brothers. Hands down. So when Booker started getting his singles run out of that, hell yeah, I was on board. Hell yeah. Booker had classics in WCW. Booker had a best of what? It was a best of 7 or best of 5? I think it was a best of 7 with Chris Benoit. Classics. Mad classics. So he's moving through and doing things, and they kind of broke him away from Harlem Heat and didn't really know what to do with him. Until finally, this is one of the few things that Vince Russo did right. Is put the belt on Booker T. He deserved it. He absolutely deserved it. And seeing him as champion and then becoming the WCW flagship, that he was a five-time WCW champion was huge, monumental. I mean, they made him a guy. They made him one of the cornerstones of the future of what WCW would be. Him and Scott Steiner, another guy from a tag team, oddly enough. That seems to be the path. I don't know if they do it as much these days, but I guess that seems to be the path. A lot of guys come out of tag teams into singlehood stardom. And again, this same thing, Bret Hart, Hart Foundation. Shawn Michaels, the Rockers. Even Brian Christopher, his kind of went in the inverse. When he started out in a tag team, he had a tag team here in Memphis when he was, before he became like too sexy. So it happened. Same thing with Booker T. And of those tag teams I named, again, Harlem Heat over all of them. Serious. That thing, still hard. Hard body. It's not rap sheet. Rap sheet is the end of yoga. But still hard. Then he came over to WWF, WWE, and then it just starts to get complicated. They basically made him a joke immediately against The Rock. Because that was the natural thing. And I'm not going to cap. Like, Book stole a lot of Rock stuff. Because it was in that time frame where WCW was, well, WWF's hot, so we're just going to steal WWF stuff. So Booker started doing the Rock bottom. We called it the bookend. So when he got to WWF, that's how they played it. They played it like he was basically a wannabe copy of The Rock. So they made him a joke. They made him a joke immediately. And in knowing that they made him a joke immediately, what I talked about last week, the most egregious WWE WrestleMania decision ever, Triple H versus Booker T, and the way that he lost that match, it makes perfectly good sense because that's what you thought of him the whole time. And if you're watching this thing, like, yeah, well, he became the world heavyweight champion. Yeah, he did, but he didn't do it as straight up OG Booker T. They had to make him King Booker. You know, and don't get me wrong, King Booker was very entertaining. I was very sports entertained by King Booker, but that doesn't change. Why wasn't he enough as himself to just be the world heavyweight champion? Not even the WWE champion, because that was the title. No, they had to make him kind of a character, you know. And again, King Booker has some very iconic. Like, I've always loved the juxtaposition of him trying to be King Booker, but then he slips back into Booker T just that quick. Two of my favorite vignettes, is there was one with Crime Time where I think they stole his wallet or something. And he's being all regal and royal, and all of a sudden he realizes his wallet is gone. He was like, yo, what the hell? Like, slipping back into that Booker T thing. I love it. And the other one is when he tried to pimp out Charmel to John Cena. And he's like, John's like, I want a night with your wife. And he's like, what? How dare you? I will deal with this peasant. Charmel leaves the room. He's like, one night, huh? All right. All right. You know, I do love that slipping back and forth thing. Again, King Booker was very entertaining. But I just wish he had gotten his due as just Booker T, you know. And then since then, you know, he has a podcast and he's on this WWE deal, and it's so disappointing. It's so, you know, we're not talking music right now. Watching Kanye become Kanye now is so disappointing. It's one of the most disappointing things, I think, not just musically, but just that I've ever seen. It's just so sad. But I feel like that a bit about Booker T too, because Booker T is basically bootlicker T. And yeah, I said it, and I love him, but some of his takes are the worst, just the worst. And you know how you want people to do better, but they won't. They can't. Again, it's a sad state of affairs. But he is still one of my faves. He's still one of my faves. His in-ring work is second to none. Like I said, just the smoothness, the way he moved, the way he like incorporated. It's almost like he incorporated hip hop into his movements without it being corny or being like that. Like there was just a cool factor. There was a cool factor to Booker T that I don't know if many other wrestlers have been able to, especially black wrestlers, have been able to achieve the way that he has. One maybe on this list a little later. The closest thing I can think to is maybe R-Truth, and R-Truth, as especially when in his Ron Killings era in TNA, maybe him, but they were few and far between. So, big shouts. Yeah, you see the lighting change when the lights went out. Big shout. Much love for Booker T. Hey, it had to be him. Moving along. We're getting a little more modern now. The phenomenal AJ Styles. Now, I mentioned this earlier, the untouchable thing. You would think that the idea of the untouchable came from one AJ Styles. It didn't. It just my thing. But similarities there. Untouchable J.R. Atkins, but I'm on AJ Styles. Not where I got the name from, believe it or not. I had it a long time ago. But that being said, AJ was again, AJ was Shawn on steroids. Not literally on steroids, but like amped up to the nth degree. AJ was mind-boggling when I first saw him. So I got into AJ. It took me a while. Because I had to get into TNA in general. And I didn't get into TNA until it may have been 2004. Then again, I may have been in my senior year of high school. I'm not really sure when. I'm not even sure when that was. But once I got into TNA, and I think the original thing may have been kind of like a Jeff Hardy, when Jeff Hardy went over. And that may have been the first match that I saw. And then I just started seeing AJ matches and AJ matches and AJ matches. And I was like, what am I watching? What am I looking at? What am I looking at? AJ Styles, that name, A is an understatement. But it's absolutely true. Phenomenal doesn't even do it justice. The things that AJ has done, still does in that ring is the stuff of legend. Legend. Okay? Like, his move set, again, the way we look at like Will Ospreay, and again, a lot of you may not even know this. If you're new to wrestling, you probably don't even know this. The way we look at Kenny Omega or Will Ospreay especially, actually, the way we look at Will Ospreay now, and it's very apropos. Will Ospreay was very inspired by AJ Styles. That's the level. The person that we're looking at and saying he's one of the best in the world right now was inspired by the phenomenal AJ Styles. He's that good. He's that good. And TNA, again, and one of the biggest travesties that TNA has committed is allowing everybody else to ascend in the places where AJ should have. All in all, AJ is absolutely the TNA ace of all time. In the hindsight of knowing what it is, we all know that. He never got his just due while in the company. He was never presented as the ace of the company, despite him being there. He was just the guy that had been there. I can't even say it. I would have said he was the Undertaker. Almost. That the Undertaker was never like a title guy that often, but he kind of was towards the end. And it really threw out. But I was going to say that maybe that AJ had more of an Undertaker legacy of just being the guy that had been around for so long and was like the epitome of that. But I don't even know if he was that. Sure, he had plenty of title reigns, plenty of world title reigns. He anchored the X division for so long. But AJ took that company and had it on his back for the entirety of the first decade of that run, I would say, and maybe beyond in TNA. But he never got treated that way. Dixie never treated him right. Hulk and Eric Bischoff came in and they tried to make him Ric Flair light. The hell was that? Though I did love the road with the hood. Again, if you know me, you know the kind of stuff that I like. That's right up my alley. Like, that was cool. They never treated him, and then they kind of gave him his Sting storyline when they were doing the Aces and Eight thing, and they kind of came as the loner, and that was cool. That worked out. But then he left. He won the title, and then he left. And then he went to New Japan, and he joined Bullet Club, and then he had more classics. And then he came to WWE, and let me tell you, in the way that Shawn's my all-time favorite, AJ's right there with him. And he's one of the few currently wrestling, right? I was terrified for AJ to join WWE because I knew in my spirit that Vince wouldn't treat him right, that Vince wouldn't book him right. He's from another company. We know how Vince is about people from other companies. Like, Vince isn't gonna treat him. He ain't gonna book him the way he should be booked. It's hard for me to defend WWE. I say it all the time. But if there's one defense that I have, they 110% understood the assignment when it comes to AJ Styles. He has been booked at least for the first maybe 5 years. Yeah. He's been booked excellently. Within the first 6 months, he was feuding for the World Heavyweight Championship. He hadn't won it yet. And I almost want to say that maybe within that first year, he had. Let me run my timeline. Yeah. Within the first year, he had won the World Heavyweight Championship. Yeah. Beat Dean Ambrose. Lost it to John Cena, which I think was a dumbass move. But whatever. And then later that next year, won it again. So 2 significant World Heavyweight title reigns. The main title, no less. The WWE, not Universal, the WWF Championship, which could be debated, but it's the lineage title. He won it 2 times. Had a very, very long reign, almost a year long reign as World Heavyweight Champion. Can't knock it. Now he hadn't sniffed it since then, but even with that, he's had a very significant, very prominent, very successful run in WWE. I don't like I want to say WWE. I started saying it, and now I can't stop. He's had a very successful run. Again, I'm a fan, so I always want him in the title hunt, and I always want them to put a belt on him, but hey, I get what it is. I get why you wouldn't. I am thrilled to the gills that AJ has had a significant WWE run, that they didn't just job him out. Now, the one thing I need now, since this partnership has opened up, and I booked this a couple of times, and I don't know if anybody, I'm not hitting the right people, or I'm not hitting the right people in the universe to manifest this. He appeared on a pay-per-view for TNA recently, and maybe for another day we'll talk about it, but the TNA WWE NXT partnership blows my mind. Cannot wrap my head around it, but that's neither here nor there. But what I'm booking is Trick has the TNA championship hostage. What better person to take it off of him than the phenomenal AJ Styles? Now, they're probably not going to do that. And the truth of the matter is, Mike Santana was the guy that should have done it. But if you're not going to do that, why not put it on him? Why not put it on AJ? Give it to AJ. One more run. I would love to see him with that title. I don't know why. You're doing it. You're not doing it. Well, you're doing the Dominic stuff with him right now. But whatever. Tell him TNA. Like I said, as far as my favorite matches of AJ Styles, I didn't do Booker T either. Though I mentioned with Booker T, their best of 7 with Chris Benoit, those are all great matches. Watch those if you get an opportunity. Great matches. But with AJ, the one that I keep going back to, it's a spot fest. And I'm not even sure which pay-per-view, but there's an Ultimate X match. He, Chris Sabin, I want to say maybe Kazarian, and maybe Petey Williams. Is it a 4-way? Or 3-way? It's the one where he gets drop kicked from the cables flips that inside out, and lands inside. Like that entire match is insane. That's probably one that I would go with. However, the Unbreakable 3-Way, which everybody says is probably one of the best matches in TNA history, is also right there. It's right there. So, absolutely, check those two out. And now we're getting a little more modern. And this one, theoretically, is a no-brainer. Forgive me again, I'm adjusting my lights. There we go. And this works perfect because the next person, can you see it? Do I need to back up and stand up so you can see it? Yeah. You know who that is. The EST of WWE, the one, the only Bianca Belair, the only woman on this list. And that's not to say that I haven't liked female wrestlers before, women wrestlers before. But there's nobody like Bianca. Period. There's nobody. When I first saw her in NXT, it was instant. Character-wise, knocking it out the park. Now she had a way to go, I think, in the ring. But character-wise, absolutely not. Undefeated. Oh, yes. Line me up, Bobo. Sign me up. I want her to beat Shayna Baszler so bad. And listen, elephant in the room, and I don't know why a lot of podcast guys or whatever don't like talk about this because they can't find a way to talk about it, I guess, without being creepy or weird. Whatever. Bianca's fine, man. Bianca is the finest wrestler I've ever seen. And I know a lot of y'all think that it's Jade, and Jade is cool, and Naomi's bad. But Bianca, though? Oh, Lord, yes. Amen. I'm a man, all right? I'm a man. I hate her and Montez Ford's perfect-ass relationship so much. Oh, hate them. So jealous. Openly jealous of these people. But that's that. Now let's get back to Bianca as the wrestler. Nailed it in NXT as a heel. You don't even go here. You know what it is? The thing that I look for the most with black wrestlers is a bit of authenticity. And not like a stereotypical authenticity, but like an authenticity that we can connect to. You know? That I can connect to. New Day was cool. Because they did have a little bit. They were black. They were really mean. They were black nerds who were still seeped in the culture. You know? So New Day rocked, basically. With Bianca, I know that girl. You know? That's the black women that are around me on a regular basis. And you could look at him like, oh, she's ghetto. I'm like, well, sometimes some girls are. But it wasn't ghetto, it was like you bougetto. You know? There's ghetto in there, but then you're classy. But you got a little ghetto side that you can pull out if you need to. But you're classy. You know? That was Bianca. She goes on the main roster, and then again, from what could have happened, they did all right. And if we're gonna talk about favorite matches, hands down, Bianca versus Sasha at Mania 37 was absolutely a classic. Main event, first, call it what it is, first one-on-one women's main event in WrestleMania history. Okay, first time two black women main event in WrestleMania. Okay, history on history on history, and the match was dope, and the match was great. Now Sasha isn't on this list slash Mercedes, but if we're going, there's a whole lot of online hate about Mercedes these days because she keeps winning titles and she's this and that. Everybody wants to like that she's overrated and she's this and she's that. There will be no Mercedes slash Sasha slander permitted on this here channel. Okay, in Sasha we trust that, but Bianca though, and then she's gone on to be like the ace. There are two things that I need, one in particular actually, that I need from Bianca because they've already broke the other one. Bianca has beat 3 of the 4 horsewomen. She needs that one. They've had one match, if I'm not mistaken, and it ended in like a DQ or something. But there's one missing, and that's one Charlotte Flair. Give me what I want. Okay, WWE, give me what I want. Bianca versus Charlotte. That's why I wish that they had kept Bianca's undefeated streak alive, because it was a built-in story. The streak, there's so much for her to win, and so much for her. It could be so much for her to lose. It doesn't even have to be about the title though. It would have been great. I would have, of all the dumbass decisions that happened in WrestleMania 41 this year, to me, fan that I am, Bianca losing her streak tops it. Trash. 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 But whatever. So I fell in love with a wrestler. And something that I do regularly is go just search. Because they don't do, here's the thing. They did right by her for a very long time. They did. And at some point, as soon as Rhea clicked, they started de-emphasizing Bianca. And I don't like that. I don't like that. And I get that she hurt right now, and I get that other people got to have a chance. But I don't like that. And just like I said, there'll be no Sasha slash Mercedes slander. There definitely won't be any Bianca slander. Because I've been hearing, I see y'all online. I see y'all online talking about it. Okay. Whatever. It's Team B over here, bro. Team B. All right. I KOD this whole month. Okay. All right. Moving on. Let's just move on. Getting to the last and one of the most current favorites that I have. And that is whose house? That's right. The one and only Swerve Strickland. Listen. It took a minute. But it takes a minute with a lot of people. Jade is probably the only person now that instantly caught me. Right? But it took a minute with Swerve. You know? I didn't really have a history of his like indie stuff. I had heard the name. I knew of him. Hadn't seen his work. Saw him in NXT. It was kind of like, he's cool. You know? I didn't see anything that a lot of people had seen in him up to that point. But once he got to AEW, off to the races. And seeing that maturation, seeing him say, I want to be the big time player. I want to be, one of the guys. And then achieving it, he bulk up, and then he just started making the moves. And I talked about Booker T earlier, and I talked about how smooth he was and how he made everything look fluid and had that cool factor. That's Swerve today. Even smooth. Like, there's a fluidity to some of the stuff he does that's like, and I know it was even crazier on the indies when he was smaller. The way he's been able to shift that into his main event frame and his main event work is nothing short of inspiring. Like, again, we're talking about matches. They're more than I can. They're more than I can name, honestly. Because the Texas death against Swerve is really the one that put him on the map in that way. Absolutely a classic. Okay, the steel cage match, the lights out steel cage match that they had last year. Was it last year? Again, classic. This year, him and Ospreay versus the Bucks. One of my favorite matches of the year. Okay. I mean, he is knocking it out of the park, something serious. So he's definitely the newest on that list of like who's my faves. And I don't see him going anywhere anytime soon on that one. And again, it's that representation. Black, like, and he's a lot like New Day, or at least a lot like how we wish New Day were. Without the silly, he's New Day without the silly. Because I mean, he comes out, he does a lot of cosplay stuff. He's done Predator, he's done Static Shock, he's done Black Panther. Him winning the championship, I jumped up and marked out like I did when Kofi did. It was the same thing, same feeling. But it was a little different because with Kofi and WWF, with Kofi and WWE, you feel like it was glass ceiling and he finally broke through. They finally did the right thing. They rectified the Booker T shit. With AEW though, it's like, no, we're not gonna have any pretense that the guy can. No, he's hot. He needs to win. He's gonna be the guy. So yeah, he's gonna win it tonight. Like there wasn't all that trauma that there was in WWE. So that one hit even better sometimes, in some ways. There wasn't a vindication. There was like, hell yeah. I think he lost it too soon, but it is what it is. He'll get it back, and we'll be on this ride again. Again, there's that cool factor there. He, in NXT, they tried to make him, he was a rapper in real life, right? He does rap. He raps his own theme song, or he raps on his own theme song. No, I think he raps he's on the song, whatever. NXT, they tried to make him that. But WWE, it's almost like Tony Storm, right? The things that he does in AEW, WWE wouldn't know what to do with that. They wouldn't know how to market it. They wouldn't know how to make that work the way it works for him. They would have went either too heavy-handed, or they would have watered it down. So him now being able to be fully Swerve Strickland, the way he envisioned to be Swerve Strickland, I love to see it. I love to see it in the ways that I love to see Bianca. Like, I think Bianca on main roster, a little watered down compared to NXT, but you had to make it work. And with Bianca, I love it because I feel like there's a bit of a through line. Bianca's basically the girl from the hood who grew up, went to a good school, went and got a good job, and now she's a little more. She still got that hood in her, but now she's a little more polished. She's a little more. She got married and she has, you know, you know, still hood girl. Like you still got that thing in you, but you ain't that girl you were back in high school. That's how I see Bianca. Swerve, Swerve is basically like that guy. He's like, yo, he was just that dude, and he went to the right place, and then he leveled up, and now he's main event. I want to see him win the Unified Championship, but I know it's not going to happen. If the word is that he's hurt, he's probably going to be, but that's my dude. Like in the ways that Booker T was in the late '90s, early 2000s, I think Swerve is that, and much more modern. That's not to say that one day he may not be one of those guys, because whatever. But as it stands, yo, dude is killing it. So those are my favorite wrestlers of all time. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for sharing this with me, sharing this journey. We're gonna call it a journey. I have fun. I hope you know a little bit more about me. Hopefully, you see what that says about me as a wrestling fan, right? And it's a bit of a gamut. They're a lot alike, and then they're very different in their own ways. And that's the thing about wrestling, man. Wrestling allows you to like what you like, who you like, what you like from who you like, right? So, great time. I enjoy doing this again. I enjoy being here with you all. Thanks for tuning in, getting my little thoughts and my feelings about wrestling and the people who I like, the matches that I like, the companies that I like, the companies I don't like, the shows I like, all those things, the things that I've attended. I have seen all of my favorites live, except for maybe Booker. I've seen Brett plenty of times back in the day. And not plenty, but I saw him at the Coliseum. Seen Sean quite a few times. Uh, at least in the second run. I don't think I saw much in the first. Brian Christopher, of course, in the Mid-South Coliseum. Booker T, I don't know. It would have had to been in WWE, and I can't recall. I'm pretty sure I have, but I don't know. AJ, plenty. I've seen AJ. If not plenty, I've seen him. A couple of Manias. I was at 34. I was at 32. Okay. So full transparency, because we're going to do that a lot here on this channel. Still trying to try out some new techniques, some new things here. Recording this episode was extremely difficult for unnecessary reasons. I was trying to do a new process, trying to do something a little different. And it worked. Maybe it needs to be a little tweaked. I don't know. But with all that being said, we're done anyway. So let me just do my quick little sign off and we'll get on about our way. Okay, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Talking About Wrestling right here on the Black Phoenix Network. Make sure you like, share, subscribe, leave a comment. If you have any suggestions, make sure you leave those in the comments. I would love to. I'm going to read everything individually, okay? Once we get more people, I say it again, make sure you tell a friend, make sure you tell everybody, make sure you share it. Once we get more people here, I'm definitely going to have lives. I'm going to start doing these lives on Saturdays. Until then, and then I have to figure out like an entire different process to what I'm doing now. So that's probably going to suck for a minute too. But I know this episode was a little different. A few little chops in here, a few little cuts. But it's okay. We worked it out. And everything's going to be okay in the end. Again, it's a process. And I want to make sure that you all are along with me on this journey as I figure out the process. And figure out how to make this show as good as it can be. So that being said, again, thanks for tuning in. Make sure you check out all my other content as well. Like I said earlier, Manifesto Mondays just launched the first episode this past Monday. And I have a new episode coming up again this coming up Monday. Where I basically give a background on some of the songs that I've recorded and released and just the background on the song, a breakdown of some of the lyrics, some funny stories from the studio, things of that nature. Also, What's Up Wednesdays was a written article that I do every Wednesday where I tackle different subjects, different things that come up. Sometimes it's love, sometimes it's relationships, pop culture, politics, religion, just whatever. All right. So make sure you tune in for that as well. And of course, be here on Saturdays for Talmbout Rasslin. Where are we talking about wrestling? That's it. That's what we're going to do every Saturday right here on the Black Phoenix Network. Again, like, share, subscribe, tell your friends, tell your neighbors, tell your enemies, tell a wrestler. Because I would love to interview some wrestlers. Hey, let me tell you, hey, if anybody's watching that knows any wrestlers who would love to be interviewed, I'm your guy. Okay? We're going to drive them numbers up. All right? So again, would not be able to be here without you. Thank you so much for tuning in. Again, I am your host, the untouchable J.R. Atkins. And this is your primary destination for wrestling conversation. This is Talmbout Rasslin on the Black Phoenix Network. And once again, we are out.